Like, can you see how much body roll there is in here? And I promise I'm not being dramatic. Like, I'm not doing, this just to make a point. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh, and I have just gotten back from the Lexus dealer where I got to see and drive the brand new Lexus GX550. Now, I have gotten to see the new GX in the past, but this was the first time that I actually got to see and drive a production version. So what I was driving today was actually, what anyone who bought a GX or is on the list for will drive off the lot. Now, before we get to that GX itself, I wanted to start this video off with one of my favorite books of all time. Diehard Lexus owners and fans like myself will know exactly what this is. This is called The Lexus Story, and this is a book that was published in 2004 by Lexus, designed by Pentagram, and it essentially tells the story of about the first 20 years of the Lexus brand. Not from the very first LS, but really truly back to the very first day of Lexus, when it was still just an idea called Circle F within Toyota. And the reason I wanted to start this video with this story is because the single biggest recurring theme in this book, as you read through every single chapter of development of all their initial products, and even really up through the time that this book was written, was that Lexus truly lived their mantra of the pursuit of perfection, and they pursued perfection at all costs. And when you read about how the first LX was developed and how it came to be, it wasn't even good enough that the LX was based on a Land Cruiser. The Land Cruiser was not good enough for the Lexus team, so they made significant and substantial changes to the already absolutely incredible Land Cruiser to get to the first LX. And the same thing was true of the first GS, the first IS, and the first GX as well, which is talked about in this book. And it really is that pursuit of perfection that I think came to define the Lexus brand for so many of us who are around my age or older, who grew up with Lexus of the pursuit of perfection age. And the reason I bring all this up is because this is the single biggest philosophical fundamental change that has happened at Lexus over, I'd say, the last 2 to 3 years, where they are no longer pursuing perfection at any cost like they used to. And so we see that manifesting in their cars, like what we've seen in the NX that I owned briefly last year, the new RX, and now this new GX. And so bringing all this back to the new GX, my biggest takeaway now of having driven a production spec GX is that, again, we have lost a lot of that perfection that we used to get from Lexus. Like in the story, they very clearly say that the LX had to have the best of the best interior. It was going to be deluxe at any cost. And when I got into the new GX today, it was sort of the opposite of that. Like, I mean, everything in there is a mid-tier grade of plastic. Everything in there is very homogeneous in terms of color and texture and visual interest. There was just nothing in that interior that stood out to me in any way, the way that old Lexus interiors have, the way that, my GX feels very premium and so special in many ways, and very clearly elevated over something like a 4Runner. And I was just in the new Tacoma about a week or two ago, and although the GX does have much nicer materials inside than the new Tacoma does, even still, they both felt like they very much could have been Toyotas, and I feel like that's a real miss on Lexus's part with this new GX. For example, one of the things I noticed straight away with the new GX, beyond the fact that the interior is very plastic fantastic, was the headliner. And I've talked a lot about this, and some people have gone, what is the big deal about a headliner? Well, in this GX, I have the softest, almost cashmere-like headliner, and it's a small detail that makes a huge difference in the overall experience of driving this GX. When I got into that new GX, it had essentially the same headliner that's in my RAV4. Like, there's just nothing elevated, in my opinion, about that new GX. The wood on the steering wheel is gone. The wood on the interior is gone. And where they could have used wood, and where there is wood in this car, we have what's called black grain trim, or what Lexus calls black grain trim. And what that essentially is just a rough textured plastic that kind of looks like it's trying to be wood, but even just looking at it without touching it, you can tell that it's not real wood. When you touch it, it's very obviously rough plastic. And there are just a lot of those things in the new GX that for me as a GX460 owner, as a fan of the Lexus brand, as someone who has bought Lexus cars for, many, many years, it's just really disappointing to me. And all of that brings me to my biggest takeaway from having now, gotten into, driven, and seen the production version of the GX is I think the person who's going to be happiest with this new GX is the 4Runner owner who's looking for a more upgraded experience from what they have, a more powerful engine than what they may have, or somebody like a Bronco owner who wants a car that feels a little bit more solid with a little bit better reliability than their Bronco. It's got pretty much the same kind of power that you get out of a Bronco as well, now that both the Bronco and the GX have a twin-turbo V6. It does actually feel very much like what I would expect a Bronco made by Lexus would feel like. And listen, I think the Bronco is a great product. I also think that this new GX is a great product, but because we're now comparing a Bronco to a GX, it's just a very different kind of product than we ever have had from the GX in the past. And again, I think that the market demographic that this new GX is targeted at is very different from the GX460 demographic, which is people like me, people who value luxury and capability, but capability coming second. And this is actually where this new GX has been really interesting to see the reaction from the general public. If you are familiar with the Lexus GX subreddit, somebody had a great post on there the other day that I'll try to screen grab and put in the video here, where I think they really accurately call out the differences between the old GX and the new GX, because opinions have been split right down the middle with this new GX in terms of whether people think it's amazing or whether people think it's just lackluster. And the people who think it's amazing are, again, 4Runner owners, Bronco owners, Jeep Wrangler owners who are ready for that next step into a slightly nicer truck than what they may have with a 4Runner, a Wrangler, or a Bronco. But it is not for the people who are coming from something like a GX460, like an LX570. Those people, us people, are all, generally speaking, pretty disappointed with this new GX. So, with all that said, let's go ahead. I'm going to flip now over to the video that I was able to take at the dealer, and I'm so glad that I was actually able to bring you all along with me on that experience. So let's take a look at that now. All right, guys, here we go, driving the new GX, and I am so excited because they actually let me take this out on my own today, which I didn't think they were going to. So unfortunately, I didn't bring, a 2-camera setup like I normally have, and so you're gonna have to look at me the whole time, and I apologize for that. But in any case, and this is just gonna be a quick kind of first impressions drive anyhow. So super excited to bring you all along on this drive. We're gonna have to stay in this general area, but we will be able to get it up to freeway speeds and poke along in traffic like what we're doing now to get out there. And overall, I have to say, as much as I love my V8 and as much as I enjoy all of its attributes, so the smoothness of the powertrain, the refinement, the almost just like silent nature of it, this is a much better powertrain for like 90% of people. So people who don't look for the kind of things that I look for in a car. So if, for example, you're the kind of person who you want more power than the V8 could deliver, you don't care for the new turbo hybrid 4-cylinder in the Land Cruiser, this is probably going to make you pretty happy, all things considered. Now, with that said, the one thing that I'm not crazy about with this new GX is because it's no longer that V8 and because the turbo V6 is a very different engine, the character of this car is noticeably different. And I think that it's partly the engine, but there is, in general, less refinement in this powertrain than there ever was in the V8 or, was in any of Lexus's naturally aspirated V6s. So there's more noise in this car than, I have in my GX than there was in the old RX. And you definitely hear that the engine has a much gruffer and rougher note than any other Lexus engine in the past. The other thing that's a little bit disconcerting, and that I'm going to chalk up to maybe this car this is a demo vehicle, and so I'm sure it's been driven around the block 1,002 times, but there is and it's obviously early production as well, but there is a very distinct and rather unpleasant kind of shudder and judder at least in this GX, that when you're driving, you feel it coming up through the seat and you feel it coming through the steering wheel. And when this car is at idle, I'm not sure, so my iPhone that I use to record does a really great job with image stabilization when I'm doing these kind of on-the-move type videos. But what I can see as I'm sitting here looking at it is when it's idling, or when this car is idling, there is a shudder and a shake that I can see in the mirror and in my phone, and it's kind of doing this, you know, as you sit there idling somewhere. And that is something that I expect from, like, you know, a Nissan Rogue or, you know, some lesser grade car, not this Lexus GX. And the other thing that, I don't know, you can probably see it as we're moving around here. There is a ton of body roll and kind of nosedive and tip and dive in this car that's very uncharacteristic, I think, for the GX in particular. Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt the video here really quickly to add a little bit more context to the body roll that you just saw in that clip and that you will continue to see throughout the remainder of this video. And if you're watching this video, you probably already know that one of the biggest changes with the GX550 as opposed to the older GX460 is that every single GX460 came with what is called KDSS, or Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System, which is a really cool system that Toyota had on a lot of their midsize and full-size SUVs, in which the sway bars, front and rear, were controlled by hydraulic chambers. And in essence, what KDSS could do is when you were on road and you wanted a firm, planted ride without too much body roll and articulation, it would actually lock the sway bars in place to control that swaying motion. On the other hand, when you wanted that articulation and some more of that kind of lateral movement and articulation off-road, the chambers could actually basically disconnect the sway bars through hydraulics. And the whole benefit of that for the GX460 and many 4Runners as well that had KDSS was that you got the best of both worlds.
Toyota's Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System, or KDSS, helps deliver enormous off-road capability without sacrificing everyday drivability. That means drivers can enjoy exceptional off-road control as well as on-road stability, all on demand.
And so again, with this new GX, because only the Overtrail and Overtrail Plus can have this system, it means that all premium trims, all luxury trims are going to drive exactly the way that you're seeing in the video, which is really odd to me because it seems like if I were in charge of making decisions, I would actually do it exactly the other way around. Overtrail and Overtrail Plus would not have KDSS and everything else would, because I'm going to assume that a lot of Overtrail owners might actually want to change the suspension, and KDSS can actually make that rather difficult because it's such a complex and integrated system into the suspension and the vehicle. And then on top of that, I've been doing some digging here because I've been thinking about this now for the last few days about this omission of KDSS and what a big deal it would be for people like me who keep their GXs on road 90% of the time. And in doing some further research into the new cars that are going to have KDSS from Toyota, they're making it a Lexus exclusive feature. That means that no 4Runner, no Land Cruiser, and no other Toyota branded TNGA-F vehicle is going to have KDSS. So all Land Cruisers are also going to drive exactly the way that you are seeing in the video. And for me, because my GX stays on road 95% of the time, if I was in the market for one of these new Land Cruiser GX or 4Runners, I would really have to think long and hard about whether the lack of KDSS in these new trucks would be a deal breaker. So keep that in mind as you go out looking at any of these new cars. Take a new GX out for a test drive. It's just a really different experience than what we've ever had with many 4Runners and of course the old GX460. So let's get back to the video now and see more of that in action. I also don't like the way that this transmission is programmed. It feels very much like the transmission in the new RX that we were driving not too long ago, where it kind of gets a little bit confused about what it's supposed to be doing, and there are some just kind of inconsistencies and dead spots in the rev range. So just like I said in that RX, sometimes when I'm driving this car around and I put my foot down, I hit an immediate dead spot because the car wasn't ready to start moving again. At other times, I get a jolt of power and kind of a kick in the back of my seat. And when all this is happening, what you're feeling, the kind of sensation that creates in this car is kind of an unpleasant rocking, either side to side or back to front. I don't know if you're hearing it in the video or in the audio from this video, but the other thing I'm getting more of than I would like, and that's actually kind of surprising for a car that's not a hybrid, is I'm getting a lot of kind of noises from this drivetrain that I usually associate with Toyota's eCVTs and other CVTs out there. It might be because this transmission has 10 speeds, and so that's a lot of gears that the car's having to figure out, you know, which one of those 10 is the right gear to be in at any point in time. But still, it creates kind of an unpleasant, unconfident, a little bit confused feeling here in this car. I don't know if you can hear that here, but the engine is kind of going, and I'm not doing that with my foot. Like, I'm not doing this with my foot just to make it do that. That, I think, is the transmission trying to figure out what it's supposed to be doing. Now, out here on the highway, I will say, this is it is a really nice powertrain to drive. Like, once you're at speed, and once you're at a point where you can maintain, just a single speed, really nice engine to drive, and it's got good power for passing, for, you know, punching out of a hole if it's willing to wake up to do that. And overall, I mean, I would definitely enjoy driving this on a long road trip. Now, out here on the highway, the other thing that I am noticing is there is less isolation and insulation from the world outside. So if you've watched any of the videos I've done with my GX460, I don't have to speak nearly as loudly as I feel like I am right now for you to hear me. But I am in this car because I get a lot of road noise, I'm getting a lot of wind noise. Wind noise, obviously, because this thing is a giant block, that's going to create more of that. The mirrors are perfectly square, and we'll talk about those in a bit too because I don't like them. And overall, again, this is kind of the same, it's exactly the same sensation and kind of phenomenon that you get driving like the old RX and the new RX back to back, the old NX and the new NX back to back. Just kind of a lack of that luxury and the refinement that Lexus was always known for. The other thing that other people have noticed as well that I am definitely seeing here, and I wish I had a camera pointed out the front, again, I apologize for not having prepared for that, but the hood is doing this, like, constantly, and I think it's because it's a lightweight, I'm assuming that that's an aluminum hood, which is a much lighter weight metal, and because, you know, all these body panels are generally speaking going to be way thinner than they would be on an old GX, I can see the hood kind of doing this. As the wind hits it, we're doing about 70 miles an hour here. As the wind hits the hood, it's kind of rippling. It's not even just like, you know, kind of, it's actually rippling. Like I can see it deforming in real time as I drive the car. Again, that's something that the 4Runner actually had a little bit of as well, and that you do see in Wranglers and Broncos and such. But I wish, you know, I don't know. It's very un-Lexus, put it that way. I'm going to go back to something that I said at the beginning of this video, which is because the interior materials in here don't feel like very Lexus-like, and because the ride doesn't feel very Lexus-like, and because the overall insulation from the world around you doesn't feel very Lexus-like, this really does feel like a nicer 4Runner. A more powerful 4Runner. It just still, though, very much feels like a Toyota. Doesn't really feel like a Lexus. And again, as you drive this thing around, body roll for days, tip and dive for days. It's definitely still a Toyota truck, but it's not a Lexus, if that makes sense. And then finally, I mentioned earlier that I'm not crazy about these mirrors. And the reason I'm not crazy about these mirrors is because they're so narrow, and I'll put a picture in the video of what I'm talking about. They're so narrow that I don't feel like I can see enough out of them. Like, if I want to really see a nice wide-angle view of what's happening out the back on that side of the car, I really have to do this, because I have to kind of move my head in order to get more in the reflection than I can see just, you know, sitting here. And that's something that I never have had to do in my GX. I also really miss my wooden steering wheel. I know that people don't care for wood, and you know, a lot of people like that this GX doesn't have wood, but I want my wood steering wheel back. I want my wood trim, because I don't think that the materials in here, they don't feel nice. I don't know. It's a much nicer 4Runner, put it that way. Not really a GX. Oh, Jesus. Again, there's a lot of body roll in this car. There's a lot of kind of floaty boatiness in this car that you just didn't get in the GX460, even with the adaptive suspension, which made the GX460 a little bit more floaty boaty. This car is just floaty boaty by default. So you hit an uneven patch in the road, you swerve to avoid, you know, something, you go around a construction zone, or, you know, I don't know, whatever it may be. Changing lanes like that, like, a lot of lateral movement in this car that I don't care for, and that I don't get in my GX460. Alright, so who should buy this GX460? Who's going to really like this? Well, I think it's going to be the 4Runner owner, honestly. That's been the interesting thing about reading the... There's that shuttering again. I can see my phone doing this in the window. Sorry, distracted by that. What I was going to say is, that's the theme, again, that I've seen on the GX subreddit, is the people who really love this car are 4Runner owners and Bronco owners and Jeep Wrangler owners who want something that's more substantial, more reliable, that's got, like, a Bronco owner might want a more reliable Bronco but not give up their twin turbo V6. That's what this is, I think. But this is not going to be the replacement and upgrade path for a GX460 owner who bought their GX460 because they wanted a luxury car that can also go off-roading when called upon to do so. That kind of less refined, gruff V6 engine note, the kind of roly-poly, floaty-boaty type ride, I think the people who are used to that are, again, Bronco owners, 4Runner owners, and I say that as a former 4Runner owner myself. So hear me loud and clear. This is not a bad product. This is not a bad car. It's just a very different kind of car than what we ever have gotten with a GX in the past. And so I think if you want to upgrade your GX460, you're really looking at like an LX 600, although that's going to have the same engine, or maybe like an Infiniti QX80, the new QX80, which looks freaking fantastic. I can't wait to see that one too at some point here in the future. So anyway, here we are back at Lexus. Thank you guys so much for coming along for the ride today. I really appreciate it, as always. And yeah, I really do. I also do hope to get this car you know, in for, so I can have it for like a week or you know, even a few days of just really getting to know it. I look forward to that because, again, I think that this is a great car for a very specific kind of person. And maybe in the future, if we can get more time with it, we will, I don't know, maybe like it a little bit more or come around to it a little bit more. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Have a great one. Questions and comments, leave them downstairs, or as always, you can always email me at the email you see on screen. And yeah, take care.